charge I make, and you can have a go at me if you like about this, that the responsibility for that dreadful war rested not only with those who ordered and did the fighting, but for those who let it happen. And I made a charge there in the original version of this, which I stand by and absolutely reinforce, that there was an understanding between the British and German governments in December of 1991, which lit the fuse for the war in Bosnia. It had to do with the recognition of Croatia as an independent state, as Yugoslavia was falling apart. There was at the time a conference chaired by Lord Carrington, the Hague Conference, which was trying to negotiate a peaceful settlement for the whole of what was soon to be ex-Yugoslavia. And at the time, we're talking about Croatia declared its independence in the summer of '91. There was some ferocious fighting, especially for the river town of Vukovar, into which the Federal Army, mostly but not entirely so, lobbed 6 million shells. What happened was that as the Federal Army was falling apart, because a lot of the soldiers of non-Serb nationalities were deserting, they were trying to dislodge the Croats from this town on the Danube, and they had to, and they didn't have infantry, so they did it with the heavy weapons, and it was completely demolished. And I've been back there again. It's worth visiting if you ever take a Danube River cruise. There was not a building left intact, not one. And I was aware of all this, and I was in the front line, and I had to go from the Croatian side, where it was getting more and more dangerous every day. I went round the Serb side, and I pleaded for access, and we got it through a colonel. I got all right, and it's probably the last time you could actually be in the front lines without being embedded. But the plight of Vukovar and of Dubrovnik, which was being shelled at the same time, enabled the Croats to exploit their sacrifices and call for recognition on the grounds that they were being attacked and Serbia was the aggressor. And they had a strong ally in Germany. Hans-Dietrich Genscher was then the German foreign minister and had been for something like 16 years. But this is all a matter of coalition politics. The German government was a coalition, and the CSU, which was the Christian Democrats' Bavarian allies, were after Genscher's job. So in a sense he had to be more Catholic than the Pope, and he was the strongest advocate of the European community recognizing Croatia there and then. And a meeting was held in mid-December 1991, and he made the case. And he said that, and initially there were 12 members of the EC then, and the original case he made was that well, the arithmetic was against him. There were 3 countries in favour of recognition and 9 against. But 8 days before, there had been another meeting of the same European community foreign ministers, and our foreign minister, foreign secretary then was Douglas Hurd, at which the British were requiring from the Germans concessions on the opt-out clauses of the Maastricht Treaty. Now, as then, Europe is a big thing in our politics. So, in fact, a deal was done. It wasn't signed and formulated, but late at night, the Germans reminded the British of the Germans' helpfulness over Maastricht, and I got this from Douglas Hurd only 3 months ago, so it's up to date. So a message was sent to John Major in Downing Street, and John Major says, yes, the recognition. Okay, fine. What happens next? Bosnia is next in line to be fought for. Now, you may argue that it would have happened anyway, but the timing was because of that. The mainly Muslim government of Bosnia held its own referendum in March '92, boycotted by the Serbs. The war began on the 6th of April 1992, and it lasted for 3.5 years. And this is the record of it. There's a much younger version there on the cover. I don't know what's happened since, but I was only in my early 50s then. And it was to me, it challenged everything I'd ever been told about journalism. You know, I'm just straight off the QM2 yesterday. I lecture on cruise ships now, when I'm not going to dodgy places for UNICEF. And I dug out from the record something I'd done in Vietnam in 1967. I was thin, I was lean, I was dark-haired, and I was complete rubbish because I was trying to be Richard Dimbleby, I think. Because in those days, all the BBC correspondents, they sounded terribly officer class. Even the football correspondent. I mean, Kenneth Waterstones had flown with Bomber Command. And I was trying to be the officer class that I wasn't. But this war really changed me. I think in the Vietnam days, I was very impressed by orders of battle and weaponry and bombs and guns and everything. And I was showing this stuff in which I was with the Americans in the Central Highlands. I also did it with I went to see the Koreans and the Australians. The Australians were deeply unhappy because they had just been shelled by the New Zealanders. But you hardly ever saw any Vietnamese. And I realized that I did it better in 1972 when I went back. And I see the parallels between where we were then and where we are now over Afghanistan. I see lots and lots of coverage of the war in Afghanistan. And it's mostly embedded journalism. There's a first chapter here that talks about the birth of embedding, because I can claim to be the first embedded journalist, because in the Gulf War of 1990 to 1991, I was travelling with accompanying the Queen's Royal Irish Hussars, a wonderful bunch of very old-fashioned cavalrymen, QRIH, known to their many rivals in the army as the queerest regiment in history. And they were lovely people, and I learned a lot. But I actually had an accreditation card, serial number 001, which was actually on display in the Imperial War Museum North. I'm so old I've been a museum piece. But I learned a lot about embedding, and I learned a lot about war. And as I got older, I realized it's entirely about people. Soldiers about people, the victims of people. And the victims can't be the soldiers. One of the points I make here, there's been a lot of wild talk about this war. There was no monopoly of evil. There was no monopoly of suffering. There was a preponderance. And the climactic disaster, which was the Srebrenica massacre of May 1995, occurred at a time in a place which was a UN-protected safe area, and at a time when there were more than 30,000 troops in the country, and UN troops, and we did nothing. We didn't lift a finger. And 8,000 young men and boys some of military age, some a bit younger, some a bit older, were killed in cold blood. And this is also part of the record, and one of the things that happened since, and one of the reasons it was brought to an end, because we couldn't go on like that. And when I say consequential, it had an amazing impact on our relations with other peoples and on the modern world. And I suppose I was instrumental in this, because we were showing, day in, day out, pictures of tens of thousands of fleeing refugees, mostly but not entirely Muslim. We were showing broken mosques and shattered minarets. There was a dreadful massacre in the central Bosnian village of Ahmići in April 1993, in which the Serbs were not involved at all. It was a massacre of Muslims by Croats in cold blood. And this, of course, got the attention of the Arab and Islamic world. One of the times I was flown into Sarajevo, we were allowed to fly on UNHCR, that's the Refugee Agency aircraft. I was on the floor of a Saudi relief plane. Other elements in the Islamic world reacted differently. And as many as 2,500 Islamic fighters infiltrated somehow through Croatia into central Bosnia, where they set up the Mujahid brigade, which was responsible for some of the worst atrocities of the war. None of their prisoners survived. They also killed aid workers. And two of the 9/11 hijackers, criminals I can say, gave in their so-called martyrdom videos, gave us one of their